Hello, people. This week we have the autobiography of Kathryn Janeway, edited by Una McCormick. I laugh because these are, of course, fictional characters. This isn't a real biography. This wasn't a real person. It's a TV show, right? But these things, especially Star Trek's much funner when you take it more serious, right? If you ingest it in a serious way, it's all more fun. So this is about the captain of the ship of the Voyager show, right? But even our author here commits to the sort of the premise of this is an autobiography because they didn't even put their name down, right? So I liked it even to start. Now, I've seen the show. I've seen the entirety of Voyager. It was a bit of a pain. I had to watch it on the Paramount app, and at the time, maybe even now still, as you're watching this, the app sucks. It's not good. I had one particular episode. What it would do is it would cut out on the episode and just start the whole thing over, right? And so it took forever to actually watch some of the episodes. But this one particular episode was a time travel episode, right? So in it, it's one of those where a sequence will repeat itself, right? So the repeat's supposed to be this long, and then I'd do this, and then I'd get here, right? And go back here, but it felt like it was part of the repeat. Like a 3-hour episode in the end because of the repeating and the restarting. What a pain. In any case. How much of the show do you need before you go into this book? I would say quite a lot, right? I would actually not recommend this if you don't like the show. Well, okay, if you don't like the show, like say, I don't personally care for the show much. I do like all the characters, but I don't care for the show. I like Star Trek. So if you like Star Trek, but maybe not particularly Voyager, you're okay here. But it's not like a self-contained sci-fi book that can, take you on this journey. So if you're just coming in fresh, don't start fresh here, right? This isn't a good entryway into Trek. Or, it's not particularly good science fiction, I guess we would say. So it's about a 3, a low 3 out of 5. Leave it on its course. Move along with your day. Don't think about it too much. But if you want to, and if you're into it, go ahead. The introduction is by Naomi Wildman. Again, there's a kid born on the show. This is her grown up doing this introduction for her favorite captain, obviously. Right? Again, these little things, it commits to its idea through and through. So we start, and now you got to remember, this is going to be an autobiography. So rather than outside viewpoint, these are the viewpoints of our main protagonist, right? Our Kathryn Janeway. And it shades certain decisions. It shades subject matter she wants to bring up, etc., etc. So, like me, coming in, I would have liked more of what happened after the events of the show Voyager, right? What did they do when they got back to Earth, right? But it's a fairly small part of this book because in lore, you can imagine she sits down and writes this. Her life isn't finished, right? So if I do a biography of LBJ, his life's done, and I can give you the whole scope of it. Hers isn't done, so, of course she's not writing too much about after the fact. And it's an autobiography. So what affects you in your life is what you're going to write about. And the bulk of her life is that 7 years in the, the Alpha Quadrant, right? So I understand it. We start with her as a kid. We do things like she liked The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. We do things like we had this kind of, what am I going to say? This Native American introduction, right? And some of these feel a little bit convenient, right? Like, of course she likes The Wizard of Oz and she got blown off course, right? Of course she likes Indians and her friend was Chakotay, who is a Native American, right? So some of those feel a little convenient. But then I start thinking, like, again, autobiography. What I think after the fact is skewing maybe what I'm writing down. Not to say, well, these things didn't happen. But maybe they didn't have, what is it? Maybe I'm remembering I'm stronger now after the fact of these events in my life, right? So it fits to me. It fits. Her mother ends up an activist for the Bajor, right? So her early life leading into high school and her early cadet life, it's the build up to the Cardassian situation, eventually the Dominion War. But before the Dominion War, it's, of course, the plate's boiling, right? It's getting hotter. And it's how Starfleet's interacting with those things. And so when Bajorans, which are my least favorite group of people in the whole of Star Trek, it's a personal issue. They annoy me. They're annoying to me. So when you're like, my mom was an activist for Bajor, I'm like, I don't care about Bajor. Now I don't like your mom because she's kind of woke, right? So I had these sort of thoughts as I'm reading this. Again, this is my issue. You might not have an issue with Bajor and the Bajorans. I really do. They're really annoying. So her mom ends up a big-time activist for Bajorans. Her grandfather and her father and etc. family members have been in Starfleet. They make a point to say that maybe her grandfather almost served with James Tiberius Kirk, right? This kind of thing where we're really invested. But it made me think of, I think the words antecedents. I think I'm saying that right. They did this with General Marshall for World War II. I think it's World War II. In any case, the antecedents is when I'm going to pick someone for a job, right? Who's going to be the next, 5-star general here, right? And then they look at your lineage straight up like you're an aristocrat. His dad was this and his granddad was that, and I think he's got the right blood, so to speak. I actually just look at this. And it kind of threw me because I'm like, it's very, in my mind, un-American. But we're like trending towards this naturally. We like Marvin Harrison Jr. right now for Ohio State, soon to be NFL player. His dad was Marvin Harrison. And I think he's going to get a higher pick. Mind you, he is good. That has something to do with it, but he's getting a higher pick because he's the son of a former player, right? And the Carr brothers. I think they're brothers. In any case, Derek Carr and then the other Carr. We get lineages of people in football. We have lineages of senators instead of just, let me grab the best one. We go, well, I'm from a family of doctors. Ooh, I trust this doctor more, right? We tend towards that idea of aristocrats almost naturally. I wonder if it's like a human thing. Very odd. But it works here in this book because this is sort of a Starfleet's Navy-esque. And the Navy, almost more than the military, really more than government, is deep into antecedents. They'll grab people obviously from outside. You'll get a chance. But there are friends and friends of friends, and I knew this kid when. That happens a lot in the Navy. And this happens a lot in this book. She has the right antecedents. Her dad ends up some kind of vice admiral or something to this effect. And so she's growing up with these top people from Starfleet just eating at her house. And she get to talk to them and this and that, right? So she sees it like, I use this resource to get information, right? To get a leg up. And I'm sitting there looking at it like, well, that's sort of unfair for everyone else who's just coming into Starfleet straight, that you have this, quote, leg up, that these friends in high places. It's kind of annoying. Of course, she doesn't see it as annoying because it's her life. They bring up that she was taught, or not taught, let's say more like, well, sort of taught, in holosuites, right? Where you could go in and have these adventures. Instead of reading like Alice in Wonderland, you get to live through Alice in Wonderland. And I'm like, the idea of that's still super cool. Right? And I know we use the holodeck a lot in the shows to hang out for this and that on, on a ship out in space, but I can imagine the same tech just in town. And not just, you know, like you go to the movie theater, but maybe almost more personal, like family time can get spent in there. Instead of you cracking the book open and reading, we do these adventures. And so you have, she mentions one of them, and I don't remember the name, but it's like, let's say Elmo, right? You would have a generation of kids growing up with the holosuite version of Sesame Street. And then, you know, the impact it could have on a generation because they all use the same program. I think that was very cool. Just the idea of what all the possibilities would be with the holosuite. You know? Just sends your mind racing. Sort of like what we're getting there with that Apple Vision, right? I'm just imagining all the ways that that thing could be useful in daily life. And I like to see it. It's part of the fun for me of Star Trek is we imagine it and then let's just see it sort of in action. We have, now it's not a lot because she was young, but some descriptors, some inclinations of how Starfleet deals with this imperialistic style military Cardassian race. Right? Because they're almost the antithesis of Starfleet, where you get to show up, your own merits get you to where you want. We don't worry about money or property or etc. Right? Everyone gets to eat. There's a home for everyone. Because we have replicators and all this and that. But the Cardassians are, what do we say? The Congress rubber stamps the military. Military is actually in charge. And then we have secret police running around making sure everyone says the right thing. Right? It's a very structured, stiff. And you can see just the threat of it starting to affect Starfleet behind the scenes, where we're making more militaristic style ships. We have less, instead of just, I'm going to go out and explore and talk to new people and then come back, we're having groups of people saying, we need to stop that and lean into this, right? The pressure's building. I would have liked more of that, but I can understand that not being in a autobiography, right? Because it's my life and I don't want to talk about it, right? She gets into the academy, I think, a year sooner than most people. She's 17. Everyone else is basically 18. She excels at school. She excels at the academy. She excels everywhere. She's a go-getter. So, you know, she does do the work. But she also gets special treatment. Booth B. We mentioned Booth B. He's your gardener. And this is, what do we say? This is Voyager in a nutshell. Because we grab a lot of elements from other Star Trek. And maybe initially it's not as good, right? Sort of 7 of 9 is like a Data who's like a Spock, but less cool than Spock and less cool than Data. Booth B was introduced, I think, in Next Generation, and so we use them again. And when it starts, even in the show, you get annoyed, right? I wish you'd think of something new. But then what they do is they wrap it in the I don't know if it's just the strength of the actors, if the actors bring something out in the writing. I'm not sure what happens, but each character ends up sort of standalone themselves. And so even wrapping an old idea If you wrap it tight enough, then it feels sort of new because they have their own sort of shape, right? So Janeway with Boothby ends up fun enough. Not as fun as it could be if you thought of new things, right? Like instead of she worked with a gardener, maybe she could work in a coffee shop, etc., right? It's not as fun as it could be, but it ends up fun enough, if that makes sense. So I didn't end up, it doesn't ruin it, right? It ends up being a lot like the show. She graduates, right? She says that at a certain point they post where you're going to end up. And that she said some people put on a brave face because they ended up being station personnel or getting a desk job. And I'm like, well, I understand. Again, in lore, a lot of them want to be starship captains. Obviously. It's got the pizzazz. But from the outside, right? I can imagine if I lived in this time and I joined Starfleet, I might kind of want to be a station personnel, right? It'd be like you live on Deep Space Nine instead of roaming the galaxy. Because let's say you're on the Enterprise and there's Captain Kirk. Yes, that's interesting. Yes, it's highly dangerous. Maybe that's not as fun. But it's also less time with each new discovery, right? So they'll find a planet, mark it, and move on. But then some other group, a science group, gets to go and spend extended amounts of time with such and such new group. To me, that would be a little bit funner. And those would be on stations, right? Their home base would be the station and not particularly a ship. Because they go and then they come back and then they go to, So I'm imagining, I don't know, I haven't read every bit of Star Trek book that there is. It'd be cool to have just not Deep Space Nine, but another type of a station, and to see that interaction of science teams coming and going, of geology teams, of terraforming teams, right? Like a little floating city. It'd be kind of cool even to live on, I think, personally. So when she says it's like looking down on it, I'm like, yeah, this is her personal opinion. But personally, for me, I wouldn't mind living on one of these space stations. And Starfleet must have a good number of them. Also, a lot of times it's sort of, because it's stationary, they end up with the highest tech you can get. So if you are a scientist, you can get more discoveries done almost because you have more time and equipment to deal with those problems. But then also, just as a side note, like imagine you're in a station, and you're close to that Vulcan border or something. I'm like, I could spend a lot of time on the planet Vulcan hanging out with, Vulcans. It'd be cool as crap. Hang out with some Klingons, Deal with ambassadors. That'd be a lot of fun, personally. She gets her first posting on the USS Albatoni. I think I said that right. And Owen Paris is the captain. This is the father of the pilot in the show. Interesting side note. She's a junior science officer, which is also kind of cool. They do a few cool things. One, they make her a scientist. Two, they don't have her obsessed with love. And for a female character in a story, I feel like that's important. Now, this isn't me being woke. Calm down. But it is a problem I find in books when a lot of people don't know. Like, Fringe had this problem, if you remember that show. We started off with one energy, and then by the end of the last few seasons, it turned into more or less like romance relationship. Now, I'm not saying women can't have relationships, but I feel like it's like imbalanced, right? There's too many where it's leaning towards the relationship and not enough leaning towards just straight a professional, a career-focused person, a person who is accomplishing, right? In that sense. Kirk's accomplishments, because he's married to the ship, are numerous. But we don't have the sort of a female equivalent ish. But that we tried this with her. And that it works. Because again, I like the actress. She's on this ship and it's semi what it used to be and what it's about to be. Meaning it's half exploration, but we're sort of leaning into the border war with the Kardashians is heating up. So she got sort of a taste of both. Now, the bulk of the Dominion War was happening while they're on the other side of the, universe. So they didn't get they didn't go to the front lines of Normandy, so to speak. She meets Tuvok on board this ship, and this is a fun one, right? I love Tuvok. I love every Vulcan. Not as much as Klingons, as they're just funner. But I love Tuvok on this show. She's the highest ranking officer on board. The other ones have gone off for some reason, and 3 admirals are going to come on. So they're like, spiffy up, get in your nice formal wear, and be there to greet our admirals with all the bells and whistles. So she's there nervous. They come on board. She's about to say, welcome to the ship. And he stops her. And he's like, officer, why haven't you done a weapons check? Right? I'm like, that's such a Vulcan thing. Of course, there's 3 admirals. Why are we worrying about, are they going to power blast a bunch of people when they come in? He says, in his mind, you can tell, not the point. The point is these are procedures and you'll follow procedure. She follows procedure. Then they move along and, of course, she's salty about it. You're making me look bad to some admirals. But we have this sort of back and forth between them early on in this book. And I like that early life of theirs, that it was contentious a little bit before they became close friends. At one point she talks about the Cardassians wanting a particular planet to be a spearhead into a future battle or whatever, right? But the idea to me is a spearhead. Would we being sort of everyone, let's imagine ourselves in this time. Spaceships are all over the place. We have warp speed. Would we have spearheads? Right? Would you pick a planet to be a spearhead? Now, I can see supply lines, but to me, a spearhead would be a movable space station. There's a lot of room out there. Right? And to me, a space station might be easier to hide, easier to defend. How do you defend the whole planet? Don't you go on the other side? Now there's ground troops. You never want to deal with that. As opposed to, let's say, a 3D fort where anywhere they land, they're fighting tooth and nail to get to the center hub that runs the nucleus of the thing. You can always blow it up before too many get on there, right? I don't know that we'd use planets we didn't even almost use islands as spearheads in World War II. Island hopping is how we won the war against the Japanese. So I'm not sure tactically we would use planets as spearheads for any kind of military incursions in anyone's zone of space, right? Be a lot of ship action. And you might even say turning a space station into 15 ships would be better, right? It'd be very amoebus, I would think. I would think it'd be real hard to make an actual front line in space. It'd be a lot of ship-to-ship action, I would think. So I don't see that we'd need spearhead of any kind like that. At least not planetarily based. Because it's just, okay, so I have a ground force. It's just going to get obliterated from space by one of these ships. Everyone has enough tech to just bombard a planet. So why am I wasting ground forces on a planet anyway? It's like you need the resources. I'm like, yes, for what? More ships? There's plenty of metal in space. You would make your shipyard as far away from enemies as possible so that, they'd have to work to get to it, but You go away from the enemy towards some other place for material. The ship's not that huge. I could see, landing on a planet, getting supplies, and then leaving, or using it till they come and attack you. But I wouldn't have anything too essential stuck on a planet, other than, of course, your home planet, which you just have to defend because you all live there. That's just me thinking. We didn't go deep into it in the book. Her next assignment is in God. I didn't get the name of the ship, but it's. Oh no, I did get it. It's a Captain Ward of the Billings. That's the name of the ship. And he's the one. He has a serious problem with her nepotism, right? She takes time off, comes back with a promotion. I mean, it's really bad, the nepotism. She has friends in all the high places, and she's getting the quick ride up, so to speak. He's working hard, and he has a little ship. So I'm like, she writes him as sort of an enemy, but it seems natural to me. He has to schmooze his way up, and she's getting a sort of free ride. So much so that she gets given Voyager at a very young age, when maybe he had been captain of this ship, he had more experience. Why didn't you give it to him? Right? Well, I know this kid. It's a good kid, and I'm going to move her up. Ended up being the right decision because the ship comes and goes through this ordeal. But still, I'm like, the reasoning is probably a bit anti-Starfleet, if we want to say anything. We get to the event. We get sent to the other side of the universe. We're now in the Alpha Quadrant where, I don't know, what is it, 200, 400 years from home? Whatever the number is. It's a very large, imposing number. Now, the initial setup on the show was, it was a bunch of it was half Maquis and half Starfleet. Now, they didn't stick to this much because it was kind of a dumb premise. One, we end sort of conflict, or try to, by, drawing up some lines and saying, this is now Cardassian space, this is Starfleet space. Well, some of the fringes of these people end up in the wrong side, right? It's what is it? The partitioning of Germany. And you might end up on West Germany, or you might end up in East Germany. And one's run by the Ruskies, and one's run by, America, and you're free. What side of the line are you on? Now, less of the struggle of running across the line. The Maquis are the ones who are colonized some of these spots. So they, in their minds, don't want to leave. Like, I put all this work in. And I'm like, it's a valid reason. But it's also a dumb reason, right? I can see, we won't leave Earth. This is our organic home, right? We were evolved here tooth and nail before we decide to, if aliens come to actually run us off. I can understand a race of people wanting to be stuck to Earth. But if you're just a colonist and you try to give me some kind of, we're Indians or we've been run off too many times, I'm like, what's one more time? Who wants to live under Cardassian rule? No one. They're horrible. And they gave you some relocation plans. I mean, you could have got another planet in Federation space and been okay. At least temporarily till war show up or whatever. But you're a colonist. That's the life of a colonist. But these goobers are like, nah, we're going to fight. And the Maquis are that organization. And they've got filled a lot by Starfleet people who, again, there's this schism, which is fun. Starfleet is not, what is it? Monolithic in their thinking. It's a diverse group of people with diverse thinking. So a good number of them would naturally be inclined to help Bajor. Then that naturally leads to you being antagonistic towards Cardassians. And so when you see this group of people getting overrun, you I'm going to resign my commission and I'm going to go join this resistance. That's what they are. So there are a lot of Starfleet people, but some of them maybe have graduated. Some of them They flunked out, flunkies, but you still have that in you for whatever reason. This drive, the need to help, all the things, all the starry-eyed reasons you join Starfleet. And they go and start fighting. They're terrorists, right? But it's like, it's such a dumb reason. And they end up on the ship, and of course, it all gets melded up fairly quickly. But to me, what would have been more interesting, because I don't think there was full war. There wasn't full war when she left, right? So I'm imagining, and the Kardashians might have done it, probably would have. Because if you're very spy-like, you do spy stuff. I can see you sending a batch of Kardashian youth to Starfleet. And I'm imagining that sort of conflict if Janeway went through academy with some of these Cardassians. And then they end up, right? So if you could some way put Cardassians on that Voyager ship before you get sent out, then the mixture's a lot funner, right? So you could Starfleet, who's a lot of them don't know these people, but she may or may not, but that they're already naturally against each other, and that we could live with that suspicion a lot longer. And then it's about, people overcoming prejudices and whatnot. Because her dad ends up dying, right? Because he was a test pilot. By his choice, mind you. But in her mind, she took that as, if these Cardassians had never been so aggressive, my dad would have never needed to be a test pilot and he would have lived. So she self-admittedly has sort of racism tendencies towards the Cardassians. Because, to me that's interesting, the Starfleet captain being sort of racist like that. And it would have been fun for her to be able to explore that. So she's over there, and it's sort of the first big decision she's going to cover in the book, and it's the decision. An entity with technology brought them all the way where they were to help his children, the Ocampa. So you have a race of sheltered people, short-lived sheltered people, and she could use the tech and leave, but then a group called, what are they called? The Kazon. The group called the Kazon would then sweep in, take over, and in her view, brutalize these people. The same way, in her view again, that the Cardassians did to Bajor. And I'm like, that's just full of prejudice. And her personal prejudice of events that happened in her life that played on this decision, right? Because, and I think she says Tuvok told her, this is against the Prime Directive. Let's say you're in a spot, now you're in dealing with politics. This is going to be politics. And you see you're stronger than them, and you want to interfere. Well, you're not supposed to interfere. So she should have taken the tech, gone all the way back home, right? Instead, she decides to break the tech, strand everyone there, and save the Ocampan from the Kazon. And initially it seems right, but then as the series goes, you start to see the wisdom of the Prime Directive. Because we take on a particular Ocampa named Kess. Fun character throughout the show. Short-lived, so she didn't make it through the whole series. She has to leave. She has telepathic powers. Powerful now. Before she leaves, she sends them, how far out? 9,000 light years forward. They get to skip out of Borg space. 9,000 years, almost in a blink. Then she leaves them, right? That's all the help she can give them. But I'm like, let's go back to that original decision. Because all of her race has strong telepathic abilities. And you think, well, the Kazon will come. The Kazon are brutish. They're kind of stupid. They're a problem throughout the show, more or less, but they're beatable. They're beatable by Voyager with a skeleton crew almost. So let's say they run amok on these Ocampa, right? Well, what would they have done in the few short years later when the Kess abilities and the rest of her, her people's abilities come to fruition, right? When they mature. Then these fools are wrecking shop on these Kazon. They might have wrecked the Kazon Empire or merged with it or subjugated it or whatever needs to happen, quote, naturally. This would have naturally happened if Voyager never showed up. You see? And then the situation might have ended up better. Because by the end, Kes comes back. She's kind of out of her mind. She almost destroys the ship. But I'm like, imagine if that had been on a Kazon ship. Then she's just wrecking bad Kazon. Now the Kazon are out of that quadrant. Eventually, right? Every race goes through some bloody wars. You learn things in war. The Okampa might have learned how to control their telepathic abilities through the fighting, as opposed to going crazy like she did. And the whole quadrant might have been better off. And your crew wouldn't have had to spend 7 years on the other side of the world, away from their friends and their family. So I'm like, it may have been the wrong decision. Just flat out on his face. She brings up Quinn. Quinn is a Q. These weren't great episodes, personally. She brings up Quinn as a Q. He was seeking asylum. The Q didn't want to let him go because he wanted to die. He wanted to kill himself. And I'm like, she ends up granting the asylum. He ends up killing himself. But Starfleet is they don't execute people. They don't have the death penalty in Starfleet. Right? And it's one of those, like you see in a trial, like, we won't extradite to a country or a state that has the death penalty because they'll run the risk of killing this guy, and we just don't believe in it. There's laws like that now. So why would I assume, if he self-admitted to wanting to kill himself, that you would allow that asylum through, knowing the end result is what he wants is to kill himself, when you're against the death penalty, right? She does. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't see why she would allow it. I would even almost think that if it's self-admitted that you want the freedom to kill yourself, then your asylum's not validated, that we won't grant it. And you make them stay with the Q continuum as much as they didn't like it, because we don't believe in dying, right, and killing. So the whole thing didn't make sense to me, like at all. But she does a few of these, right, where she tosses out. And again, she was a young captain. Maybe too young. Maybe the other guy should have had it. But nepotism. See? She does a lot of things anti-Starfleet in spots. This is one of them to me. I didn't like it at all. The next issue, the big issue, is two Vics. We go through a teleporter. We do something. Tuvok and Neelix get merged into one new being. And the problem is, what do we do with this? He wants to live. He's like, I am a life and I want to live it. I understand that. But one, it's kind of rough that your life is costing two other lives. A. But more important than that to me, because some people think you shouldn't have split them up. And I'm like, I don't know the rationale for not splitting them up. One, it's an unnatural life. Meaning the teleporter is our tech. We didn't intend to make life. It was an accident that merged these cells together. And now it's new sentient, meaning you have thoughts. I'm like, okay, thoughts make you alive. But it's not a natural start. So why should the end be natural? Or flip it. If you came together this way, and I pull you apart and you cease to be, then is it that time you had your natural lifespan? Right? Some races live longer than other races. Some might cocoon and turn into other things. Right? So your start was instantaneous from the teleporter. That's your start. And if, you might want to live, you might not have aged, but why wouldn't if the same thing happened, you would get this, what is it, the same amount of time, right? Because why isn't that unnatural end the same as your unnatural start, and the process between the two being your natural life? You get what I'm saying? He wasn't meant to be. He became. And by our standards, it was killing him to make him not be anymore. But that might be, what's to say that's not the natural course for the being that he was, given his unnatural start? You see what I'm saying? That's my thinking on it. So I'm fine with them getting rid of Tuvix to get Neelix and Tuvok back. She did it for, this is my friend, personal reasons. I'm like, I guess that's as good enough as any. But if we looked at it scientifically, like if a bunch of Vulcans looked at it logically, well, logically they'd say, well, no, maybe not logically. Logically, you would think you have both in one, but that also makes both easier to be destroyed. You lose your chief officer and a Vulcan, and your what was Neelix, the chef and like a morale officer. You'd lose, as opposed to being two, and an accident can't get rid of both at once, right? So even logically, that might be the right way to go. She tries to bring up an example of a thought experiment, the classic, you're on a runaway train and you can, sacrifice one life to save 5 that are on the track. This kind of setup. And I'm like, it's supposed to be a difficult decision, but I don't think you can ask someone to self-sacrifice. You can personally self-sacrifice. Like if you choose to kill yourself to save 5 others, maybe. But then in the situation, it'd be hard to guarantee, right? Like what's the guarantee that my death equals all of them living? We're on a runaway train. Everyone might die anyway. But it's supposed to be difficult. To me, it's not difficult. I don't think you can ask someone to kill themselves to save any number of other people. You have a right to your own life. But I don't think it applies to Tuvix, because his life's unnatural to begin with. And so, like I said, an unnatural end is a natural end. And so nothing wrong has happened. Butterflies live, what is it? A certain type of fly live 20-something days. Is it unnatural? No, it's just his natural courses to be short-lived. Same with Tuvix. He brings up, at some point, our hologram doctor has an issue he can't deal with, so he digs in the database and finds a Moset, a Cardassian doctor program. It's everything this doctor knows, because it's a hologram making machine. So he makes this doctor and asks him, well, he got his knowledge by, of course, your horrible scientific testing on Bajorans. Now, I'm trying to save an actual crew member. But the dumb Bajoran Maquis on the dumb ship start getting mad that this doctor is even existing, and they try and take him out or whatever. And I'm like, see, that's just this. The Bajorans are just irrational sometimes, because he's not real. He's a hologram. Now you go, well, he learned all his stuff by testing on my family. And I'm like, well, is getting rid of this dumb hologram making your family less tested on? No. They already went through the pain. Bunch of them already died. So what good does it do this sick person here to not get the help that this person could have provided, this hologram? What good does that do? What good does extra suffering do to the suffering of your friends and the family? Right? It's patently stupid. Now, do I condone his scientific experiments? No, clearly they were wrong. But it's after the fact, bro. It's history. History, you learn from history. He killed 1,000 puppies. Yeah, but now we got a rocket ship that goes from here to the moon in a half an hour. Well, let's not use it because in the honor of those dead, I don't care about some dead puppies. And it's people. They're not any less dead because we're not using the tech. It's just nonsensical. But they use it, they save the person, and then he deletes the program permanently. And I'm like, one, that's kind of messed up. Two, And the other issue I was just thinking of is he sees himself as a sentient being. Photon rights is what he ends up fighting for when he gets back. And, certain of these holograms are real enough, blah, blah, blah. So why would he... Isn't that murder if he deletes a hologram of that guy? Isn't that getting rid of the sentientness of that guy or the possible sentientness? Because those photons could end up being sentient like he was? This is like... It didn't hold to its own ethics. It ends, of course, they get back to Earth. They're famous because everyone had been watching this runaway ship once the news got out that there's contact with them. Of course, that's what humans would do. Harry Kim ends up a captain of his own ship. Forget what happened to 7 and 9. I think she went to Starfleet or something to this effect. I know she ends up in more shows later on. Specifically, I think season 4 or 3 of the new Picard show. Whatever the last season was, watch that one after Next Generation. Don't watch any of the rest of new Picard. Don't watch any new Trek. It sucks. But you just remember that in case you get into it. Chakotay is there for a few months and then resigns his commission, and then he becomes like a wandering Indian. I don't know. That seems right to me. And then Janeway ends up with a kid because she had her eggs frozen before she left. They thought she was dead, so they used her eggs to make a kid. I'm like, that's kind of weird, but I guess, I don't know. It works out. It also seems like a potential character you could use. The young Janeway and do new Starship stuff. I think that'd be cool. But that's the book. I went longer than I actually thought. That's what's fun about Star Trek. The more you allow yourself to sink your teeth in, sort of the more fun you have just reading these books and thinking about it. But it's ad time. I might have went quick on the ad break. I didn't do enough wind down. But I can't go back now. So these are my books. These are available for purchase. If you want to help the channel, buy any one of them or all of them. If you want to just read them, you can also get Kindle Unlimited and read them all off there. It doesn't bother me. I don't get any extra particular ad money. I get whatever normal money they have for the unlimited programs, like Spotify or books. But you can also subscribe if you are inclined. But you don't have to. I don't push that too much. Okay, people. This was fun. I'll see you all next week.